Before the creation of mankind, before the first ray of sunlight touched the earth, before time itself began to flow, the heavens were torn apart by the greatest conflict ever known to exist. This is not a tale of earthly kingdoms or mortal struggles. This is the story of the first and most devastating war in heaven. In the pristine courts of heaven, where perfect peace had reigned for eternities, an unthinkable act of rebellion was about to shatter the harmony of creation itself. This conflict would reshape the spiritual realm forever and set the stage for humanity's own struggle between good and evil. Imagine armies of celestial beings, more numerous than the stars in the sky, divided against each other. Picture Michael, the great prince of angels, leading the faithful hosts of heaven against Lucifer, once the most beautiful and powerful of all created beings, now consumed by pride and rebellion. The Bible gives us glimpses of this epic battle, not in mere symbols or metaphors, but as historical events that shaped the very foundation of our universe. In the books of Revelation, Isaiah and Ezekiel, we find the shocking truth of what really happened when pride entered paradise. What you're about to witness is not mythology or fantasy. These events, recorded in sacred scripture, reveal the origin of evil itself, the fall of angels, and the cosmic battle that continues to echo through time. Every detail we'll explore comes directly from biblical sources, painting a picture more dramatic and consequential than any human conflict could ever be. Join me as we uncover the shocking truth about the war in heaven, the rebellion that changed everything, the battle that divided the angels, and the victory that set the stage for humanity's own role in this ongoing cosmic drama. What really happened in those celestial courts? Why did Lucifer, the most perfect of all created beings, choose to rebel? And how does this ancient battle continue to affect our world today? The answers lie in the pages of Scripture, and they're more incredible than you could ever imagine. Before darkness entered creation, before pride corrupted his heart, Lucifer stood as the pinnacle of God's created beings. To truly understand the magnitude of his fall, we must first comprehend the heights from which he fell. The prophet Ezekiel gives us a remarkable glimpse into Lucifer's original glory. In Ezekiel 28, verses 12 through 15, we find a description that surpasses human imagination. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom, and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you, ruby, topaz and emerald, chrysolite, onyx and jasper, sapphire, turquoise and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. Consider the magnificence described here. Lucifer was adorned with 9 precious stones, each reflecting divine light in spectacular ways. His very being radiated the glory of God. The gold mountings suggest a level of beauty and craftsmanship beyond earthly comparison. But more remarkable than his appearance was his position. The scripture continues, "You were anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created." Isaiah 14:12 calls him Lucifer, son of the morning, suggesting his role in leading the morning songs of praise. Ancient Hebrew traditions suggest that Lucifer was created with built-in musical instruments, tabrets and pipes mentioned in Ezekiel's account. Imagine the scene. The morning stars singing together as described in Job 38:7, with Lucifer conducting the greatest choir ever assembled. His very being was designed to produce heavenly music, leading all of creation in worship to the Almighty. Among the celestial hierarchy, Lucifer held a unique position. As an anointed cherub, he stood in the very presence of God. The cherubim were not mere messenger angels. They were the highest order of celestial beings, guardians of God's holiness. Lucifer's position placed him above millions of other angels. Some scholars suggest he might have been one of only 3 archangels alongside Michael and Gabriel, though Scripture doesn't explicitly confirm this. Perhaps most intriguing is what Lucifer's eventual fall reveals about heaven itself. Even in perfect paradise, in direct presence of God, angels possessed free will. They were not mindless servants, but beings capable of choice. This freedom made their worship genuine, their service sincere. Every moment of obedience was a choice Lucifer made countless times before his fatal decision to rebel. This was Lucifer at the height of his glory, perfect in wisdom, beautiful beyond description, highest among angels, leading creation in worship. But, as we'll see in our next segment, even such lofty position and divine favor weren't enough to prevent pride from taking root in his heart. How does perfect beauty become corrupted? How does divine wisdom transform into arrogance? The answer lies in one of the most chilling verses in Scripture, Ezekiel 28:17. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. In the perfect realm of heaven, where no sin had ever existed, something unprecedented began to stir. Lucifer, the light-bearer, began to look at his own reflection rather than reflecting God's glory. His magnificent beauty, meant to point toward his Creator, became a source of self-admiration. Like a disease spreading through perfect cells, pride began to corrupt Lucifer's wisdom. Every gift that God had given him, his beauty, his position, his authority, became fuel for his growing self-importance. The very wisdom that should have warned him against pride became the tool of his corruption. The Scripture tells us his heart was lifted up because of his beauty. Imagine the first moment in all of creation when a creature took credit for what the Creator had given. This was more than vanity, it was the birth of evil itself. But pride wasn't content to merely admire itself. In Isaiah 14:13-14, we find the 5 most audacious statements ever uttered in creation. Each "I will" declaration reveals the progression of Lucifer's corruption. I will ascend into heaven. Though already in heaven's realm, Lucifer wanted more. He desired to ascend to God's own throne room, the highest heaven itself. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. The stars often represent angels in Scripture. Lucifer wasn't content with his position. He wanted authority over all other celestial beings. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation. This refers to God's place of authority and governance. Lucifer desired not just power, but the very position of divine rule. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. The clouds often represent God's glory in Scripture. Lucifer wanted his own glory to surpass God's manifestation. I will be like the Most High, shouts the Lucifer blasphemy, the ultimate blasphemy. Lucifer didn't just want to serve God, he wanted to replace him. Notice the progression from discontent to desire, from desire to ambition, from ambition to rebellion. Each "I will" statement builds upon the previous one, revealing pride's insatiable nature. Pride is never satisfied, it always demands more. What makes this moment so tragic is that Lucifer's wisdom was still intact enough to know better. He understood God's power and authority, yet pride had so corrupted his judgment that he believed he could succeed in overthrowing his Creator. In these 5 declarations, we witness the transformation of the highest angel into the adversary. But Lucifer's rebellion wouldn't be a solo act. As we'll see in our next segment, his corrupted ambition would lead to the unthinkable, a divide in the ranks of heaven itself. Revelation 12:4 reveals one of the most shocking statistics in all of Scripture. And behold, a great red dragon, his tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them down to the earth. 1/3 of heaven's angels. Let that sink in. These weren't mindless beings, but mighty, celestial creatures who had dwelt in God's presence since their creation. Each had served in perfect harmony, each had witnessed God's power and glory. Yet somehow, Lucifer's rebellion found residence in their hearts. How did Lucifer convince so many? Scripture gives us clues about his methods. As the father of lies, John 8:44, he likely used the same tactics he would later use in Eden. Questioning God's authority, promising greater power, sowing seeds of discontent, distorting truth. Imagine the first whispers of rebellion echoing through heaven's halls, the first doubts, the first questions, the first moments of divided loyalty. Heaven itself began to polarize. Angels who had served together for eons now found themselves on opposite sides. The spiritual realm witnessed something unprecedented, the formation of battle lines in paradise. On one side stood Michael, the archangel, leading the angels who remained faithful to God. His name means "who is like God," a direct challenge to Lucifer's 5 I wills. On the other side, Lucifer gathered his followers. Revelation describes him as a great red dragon, suggesting his beautiful appearance had already begun to transform to match his corrupt nature. This wasn't a battle of physical weapons as we know them. This was spiritual warfare at its most pure and terrible form. The weapons were truth versus lies, light versus darkness, loyalty versus betrayal, worship versus pride. The power wielded by these beings would make our most devastating weapons look like children's toys. These were creatures who could destroy entire cities, as we later see in Scripture. There was a moment, a final moment, when the division was complete, when former friends became eternal enemies, when the harmony of heaven was shattered by the discord of rebellion. The peace of eternity was about to be broken by war. The perfect unity of heaven was about to be torn apart by conflict. The greatest battle in history was about to begin. In one camp, Michael and the faithful angels, standing firm in their loyalty to God, their power channeled through righteousness and truth. In the other, Lucifer and his rebels, their God-given powers now corrupted by pride and ambition, preparing to wage war against their own creator. The stage was set, the lines were drawn, the serenity of heaven was about to be shattered by the unthinkable, open warfare in the courts of paradise. Revelation 12:7 describes the moment when heaven erupted in war, and war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought.
Imagine a place of perfect harmony, where love and peace ruled, suddenly torn apart by rebellion. A war so monumental that it didn't just affect the heavens, but has shaped the very world we live in today. This war, the war in heaven, was not just any battle, it was the first act of rebellion in the universe. But what caused it? What were the consequences? And how does this cosmic conflict still affect our lives? In today's video, we'll dive deep into the biblical story of the war in heaven, its origins, the key players involved, and its lasting impact on our world. Stay tuned to the end to understand how this ancient conflict might be influencing your life even now. Before the war in heaven, there was peace in the cosmos. God had created an order of angels, celestial beings who served him in worship and obedience. Among these angels, one stood out for his beauty, wisdom, and power: Lucifer. His name means light bearer, and he was a being of immense brilliance and authority. According to Ezekiel 28:12-17, Lucifer was the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. He was adorned with precious stones and held a position of great prominence in heaven. Some scholars believe Lucifer was in charge of worship in heaven, orchestrating the praise that all creatures gave to God. He was near the throne of God and had immense influence. But something changed. Over time, Lucifer began to look not only at the beauty and power given to him, but also at God's authority, which he started to covet. Isaiah 14:12-14 describes Lucifer's inner thoughts. I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High. Lucifer's pride became his downfall. He was no longer content being the most glorious angel. He wanted to be God. Lucifer's ambition led him to spread discontent among the angels. He convinced a third of the heavenly host that they too could rise above their station and have power and freedom outside of God's rule. Revelation 12:4 tells us that a third of the angels followed Lucifer in his rebellion. But freedom, apart from the Creator, was a deception. Lucifer's rebellion wasn't just a power grab. It was an outright rejection of God's love, justice, and truth. The very nature of heaven, which had been a place of perfect order and unity, was now on the brink of collapse. A line was drawn, and the rebellion took root. But rebellion in heaven could not go unchallenged. Revelation 12 gives us a powerful image. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. Lucifer, now referred to as the dragon, led the rebellious angels in a cosmic battle against the forces of heaven. The leader of God's forces was Michael, the archangel, known as a mighty warrior in God's army. Michael and the angels loyal to God stood firm against the rebellion. The Bible doesn't tell us all the details of how this battle played out, but we know it was an intense struggle between good and evil, light and darkness. The once beautiful and harmonious heaven was now a battlefield, filled with the clash of spiritual forces. Despite the power of Lucifer and his angels, the forces of good triumphed. Michael and his angels overpowered the dragon, and the rebellious forces were cast out of heaven. Lucifer and his followers were cast out of heaven, expelled from the presence of God. The Bible describes this fall in Revelation 12:9. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Lucifer, once a being of light, had now become Satan, the adversary. His rebellion cost him his place in heaven, his beauty, and his future. But his war was far from over. Banished from heaven, Satan turned his attention to God's new creation, the earth. Here, he would continue his war against God by targeting the pinnacle of God's creation, humanity. After being cast out of heaven, Satan's first move was to corrupt humanity. In Genesis 3, Satan, in the form of a serpent, approached Eve and tempted her to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, directly contradicting God's command. By deceiving Adam and Eve, Satan succeeded in introducing sin into the world, separating humanity from God. This act was an extension of the war he had started in heaven, an attempt to undermine God's authority and destroy his creation. Since that time, the war has continued on earth. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us that our struggles are not just physical, but spiritual. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Every conflict, every temptation, every moment of suffering is a reminder of the ongoing spiritual battle between good and evil. Satan and his forces continue to fight, trying to pull humanity away from God. But the war in heaven and the war on earth is not without hope. Though Satan continues to wage his battle, the Bible tells us that the ultimate victory has already been won through Jesus Christ. Colossians 2:15 declares, "And having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Through Christ's death and resurrection, he defeated